All right, well, welcome to Unit 5. Let me, hopefully, hopefully we'll be as brief as I can. I want to get some good content out, but let me just say thanks so much for your involvement, your participation so far. I've been doing this for a long time, this class specifically, and I am really impressed by how engaged you are in the content, so thanks for that. It means a lot to me, and I hope that you are finding it to be very valuable and helpful as you kind of explore these new content areas. So one of the things that I hear all the time is I didn't realize how much I would enjoy the class. And I hope that you're enjoying the class. I hope that you're finding it to be valuable. I hope that, maybe you came in thinking, why do I take a class in career development? It hasn't had nothing to do with marriage family therapy, nothing to do with, professional counseling. And, perhaps now here you are in the middle of it, and you're going, wait a second. I'm starting to see how it has a lot to do with all that. And what I would also say is I hope that you're seeing how, let's see, I guess how personal this is what I would say. And how, one of the things that I think it's really important for us to do is, if we want to be as effective as we can be, I think it's important for us to kind of introspectively look at ourselves first. So what is it about this content that I need to look at personally? Like, what does it mean to me? Like, how do I think about this? And so some of the questions you'll notice are their personal questions. They're questions that deal specifically with us, with our experiences. Because if we can't discuss our own experiences, and it's going to be hard to, and I think from a legitimacy standpoint, ask others to speak to their own experiences. So that's what we're doing. We're speaking to our own experiences and bringing that into the discussion. It also, what it does, as we've seen, it allows us to kind of acknowledge that, oh yeah, I have some biases here, some things I need to make sure that I don't bring into the client conversation. Or, and probably, it's never really the best idea to be like, well, from my experience, because I think in some circumstances that's okay, but oftentimes we kind of want to remove ourselves a little bit, but it does help from an empathy standpoint. It does help even from a human-centeredness standpoint if we can acknowledge that we've been in certain situations or circumstances before, and so we can relate in some ways that perhaps if we didn't acknowledge that, we may not be able to. So thanks for that. So we are now, as you know, you're fully aware of the fact that we're in week 5 or unit 5. And if you look at the syllabus, you'll notice that we are kind of transitioning now into chapters 8 and 9. We're not going to get to every single chapter in the book. So there's 17 chapters in the Anderson and Vandehy text, and we're actually going to skip chapters 12, 13, and 14. It's not because they're not important, because they're very important. Excuse me. We just don't have time to cover them all. And so one of the things that, as I was thinking about this class from years ago and developing the content, the thought that I had, the realization that I had, the decision that was made was that those chapters, 12, 13, and 14, these are chapters that have, like I said, important content, but probably not as important or maybe as relevant to the world's, from a industry standpoint, if you want to use that terminology, that you will be going into. Some of you may. But for the most part, you're probably not going to be dealing with, at least from a career development standpoint, you're not going to be dealing with childhood, kind of the teen years, right? So adolescence and then high school age and all of that. So really what you'll probably be doing is spending the majority of your time in kind of the emerging adulthood, and so forth. So we're going to skip those 3 chapters. I would strongly encourage you to go back and read those chapters when you have the time to do so, because it will all help to inform how you think about emerging and then adulthood, right? So those are important. We don't have time to cover them in this course. Which gets me to kind of thinking about this idea of the kind of the sequence of how this book, the Anderson and Vandehy book specifically, has been developed. So if you think about the content, you will have seen that probably the first 7 chapters, I guess you could say, we've really spent some time looking at kind of the theoretical framework, right? The theoretical kind of understandings of career development. And that's important for us to point out, for me to point out, because we're now transitioning into kind of the technique related or the process. So even in these next chapters, we're looking at the career counseling process and then career counseling techniques. So this is important for us to think about theory and then praxis, right? So one of the things I think that so often we don't acknowledge enough of is that something, usually theory, is informing action. So I think it was Carl Jung who said, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. Some people really don't like that statement. I love that statement because I love theory. So I have colleagues that I could just, they know me, they make comment on this. I could just sit around and I could philosophize and theorize all day long. I could create a great book, and I could sit there and drink a cup of coffee and just think. I could just intellectually think about these things. And then there are those, I have some colleagues that would call themselves more practical academics. I do believe that I am as well, especially because I'm doing this work that we're talking about here. I have to practically act upon it, right? I have to apply it. But they would say, get your heads out of the cloud, boy. And, we're here to actually teach students how to do, not just how to philosophize. But I think that's dangerous because we need to be, and that's kind of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. What we are in the business of doing is hopefully, we are hopefully teaching students how to critically think so that they can then practically act. So I think that what happens so often is we act before thinking, right? So you probably, if you have kids, or at one point if you were a kid, which by the way we all were, someone may have said, think before you, what? Speak. Well, think before you, what? Act. But let's take a step back, take it back a step further. So think before you act. Well, how do we think? How do we think rightly? Well, we put the right things in our minds. And so for the last 7 chapters of this Anderson Vanity text, we've been reading about how to think about career development from a theoretical standpoint. That theory then informs our techniques or our practice, which informs the way that we do the work that we're here to talk about, right? So these last 7 chapters have been very important as they lead up to what we're looking at in chapters 8 through eventually 17, the rest of the book here that we're going to spend some time in the next 4 weeks, right? So important content. You will be doing, case study number 7, which I have updated. And the questions are a little bit different than the other case studies that you're accustomed to. You'll get it. They're very straightforward and simple. And I'm looking for more or less just kind of how you would approach things. Okay, so get into case study number 7. You'll see what I mean by that. I think it's a great exercise, especially as we spend time looking at kind of the information gathering process as we look at in LipTAC, and then the developing rapport with the client. So there's some interesting dynamics to working with specifically college students in a career center, and that's what we're going to look at with the case of Alyssa this week. Okay, so that's been updated, and you'll see that as updated in your Sakai shell when you go to case study number 7. We'll also spend time in Unit 5 forum, and then, of course, the LipTAC 321 response number 4. A couple things to mention about the forum discussion. This is a week where you don't need to, hear me, you don't need to engage in discussion with your classmates, okay? I just need you to post your response. And that doesn't have to be done until Sunday at midnight, okay? So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be giving me and the rest of the class 3 examples, 3 artifacts of things that you find to relate to the field and study of career development, okay? You can read the description. It'll make much more sense as you get into it. And then you'll provide a brief one paragraph or so, kind of justifying statement that explains how and why you see whatever artifact you've shared connecting to what we're studying, okay? So again, you don't have to engage in discussion, but you have to share those 3 no later than Sunday at midnight. And then the second part of that, you would share what's the one technique that you most identify with. So, and I want you to be thinking about that, because the assignments that we're doing, especially even this week, I would say, and everything we've done so far, are really leading towards our final assignments at the end of the semester. Okay, so take these seriously, invest some time, but just know that you don't have to engage in discussion with your classmates this time around. Okay, let's see. What else are we doing? You've got your continued reading for vocation and calling, so whatever book you have read or you've chosen to read, you'll continue in that. And then, of course, the assignment is due at the end of next unit, Unit 6. I already mentioned this, but I want to mention it again. Some great discussion, some really fun, and I think insightful, helpful, important, real personal stories being shared as it relates to this vocation and calling book. Folks really taking it seriously and getting into the content. Man, just making some really important comments in that section in the forums. So thanks for that. I'm reading these things and going, holy smokes, this is awesome. So thank you for your commitment in that. I really do appreciate it. Continue on with those readings. If you haven't had a chance to share with the class what vocation and calling book you have chosen, please go into the forums, and there's a section toward the top of the forum that asks what book you read and kind of helps ask for you to explain why you've chosen that book and why you chose whatever book it was that you chose over some of the other books that you were available to read. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you on that. So really good discussion, so thanks for that. Okay, so lots to do this week, and of course lots to do in the following weeks. And of course we've done lots in the previous weeks, and you have really engaged, and I so appreciate that. So I wanted to briefly touch on some questions. So lots of really important, great questions, and I really appreciate just what you're sharing. So I love how you're getting into the content. These 3-2-1s are so, I think they're so important, and they're so helpful because it kind of forces you to say, okay, so what are 3 things that I really learned? Why are they important, right? So and then what questions do I still have? So there's been some questions about kind of what theory do I use if I'm working with a client who may have some special needs, some disabilities? And the example that was given was autism. So I think this is again where perhaps some of the skill sets that you have really fold in nicely to what we're learning here in this class. This is a big area, disabilities and work. So how do we encourage individuals to pursue work? I think that's one of the things that we feel a bit, and this is not my area of specialty, so I can't speak to this entirely, but I do know that I think that, one of the things that we need to see is what jobs are available, first of all, that are appropriate for individuals that may have certain disabilities, certain learning, disabilities, certain special needs that they have. And I say what are available, not that we should necessarily limit, but what are are there certain jobs that are saying, hey, we really need individuals, and we actually love working with folks that have special needs. And then it goes back to the emancipatory communitarian approach, and we go, okay, so what job from an advocacy standpoint do career counselors have? So I say available, maybe I say acceptable, but you could also look at that from a gender or even kind of cultural, ethnic background. So these jobs are available and acceptable, but what are we doing to kind of push the limits and say, why is that? Why can they only qualify for this? But I think a lot of it comes in, as we're going to talk even about this week, is how do we develop rapport and how do we gather information? How do we say, okay, so I know that you have some of these challenges, but let's work with that and let's ask some questions. Let's figure out, where can we place you? How can we kind of help you to identify the desires, the needs, the wants that you have? And then let's be really intentional to go work with organizations and ask the right questions. And perhaps let's not just say, oh, you can only do this or that. I saw an article, and I haven't read through the whole thing yet, but it was an amazing little reference to an individual that has Tourette's, and they have these twitches. And the pictures that you're looking in this article, this individual is a barber, and is using the straight edge, and he's got these ticks, these twitches. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I had somebody straight edge my beard one time, and they didn't have Tourette's, they didn't have twitches, and they didn't do a very good job. But this individual's been able to overcome the challenges that come with Tourette's, and living out his dream, doing the thing that he's wanted to do forever. So how do we encourage our clients to do that? How do we help them? I had another question about so applying Ginsberg's objective of assisting the client with life redesign and helping clients deal with feelings of traumatic situations. Is this outside of their scope of practice? Well, it all depends. I mean, if you are a therapist, if you're a licensed MFT or a licensed LPC, and you can bring that experience into the career counseling situation, then no. But for some that are strictly doing this from a career counseling standpoint, don't have the other training, then I would say yes. have to be careful. Don't wade into things that you're not qualified for. So great questions, great content. Have a great week, and we'll see you online.